The Beastmen are one of the strongest factions in the game, but that does beg the question, who's the very best of the best? Today let's rank every Beastman legendary lord from worst to best to find out who's number one. Starting our ranking in 4th place, we have Morgur the Shadowgave. On the campaign side of things, his faction effects are really good right out the gate. More Chaos Spawn and Chaos Corruption is fine, but more replenishment and reduced building cost for hordes is goated. Replenishment speaks for itself, but making horde buildings cheaper means it's easier to build higher tiers earlier, and that means faster access to more powerful units. Starting location isn't too bad either, but it could be better. The starting war can be challenging since Tillier generally just sit in Margarita. Building a full stack and sieges aren't exactly the Beastman's specialist skill. With Vicket Claw to the east, your only real option is to head north into Bretonnia or the Wood Elves, both of which are a pretty good matchup for you. There is a distinct lack of options unless you really want to set sail a few turns into the game, which probably isn't the best idea. It's not the easiest or the hardest, but it is one of the most limiting. Over on the battle side of things, his army effects are a little less exciting with more corruption, fun with passives, raiding, immunity to Wood Elf attrition. Like, okay, sure. Spell resistance for the entire army is pretty nice, and the fact he never stays dead is cool, but if you lose him, especially early on, you kinda lose the game anyway. His skill tree is similarly underwhelming. The bonuses he brings to more chaotic units are nice, with an area damage buff for the Jabberslaves and regen for the Chaos Dwarves, but aside from that, it's pretty mid. The ancillaries he can use to place various effects on his units are fun, but again, nothing that powerful. Add on the fact he's not that great a battler himself and never really becomes one, and he's left feeling a little lost during endgame battles. The Chaos Spawn focus is unique and makes them a little bit more viable, but even with the summon from his item, they're still not the best units in the roster, so focusing on them will always be putting yourself at a disadvantage. I'd like to reiterate that all of the Beastmen are incredibly strong, so Morgur is no different. He just happens to be the one that I feel is the weakest overall. His faction focuses on units that aren't all that great, so he's been held back from the first moment and will never reach the heights of the others. He doesn't bring a lot of value to battle, so ends up being stood around not doing much, which isn't really what you want from a lord, or a CEO for that matter. If you play him, you'll still be able to have a good campaign, but if you want the most powerful Beastman lord, he simply isn't it. Coming in 3rd place, we have Khazrak the One-Eye. On the campaign side of things, right off the bat, I really like these faction effects. Reduced dread cost for all unit upgrades mean you can field elite armies a whole lot easier. Extra evasion chance when using the beast paths makes it a lot safer to use for a quick getaway or a gap closer, and an increased ambush success chance is ridiculously powerful with their roaming ambush stance. Starting in the Empire is a little bit scary, and Lorelorn isn't the easiest first battle in the world since you're straight into their magical forest without any minor settlements to warm up on. After this, it really is the Empire show for most of the game, which is kind of a mid matchup depending on the army comps you come up against. The one hard part is the fact they'll all gang up on you, especially once Special Agent Karl Franz catches your trail. It's quite dense, so you can easily grind Ruination pretty fast. It can just be quite challenging choosing where to go. In battle, his army effects are just fine. The reduced detection and rage penalties make camping a lot safer to do for longer periods of time without totally killing your momentum, but you really want to be on the move as much as possible anyway, so it's whatever. The Vanguard for Bestigors and Razorgore chariots are nice for closing the gap or setting up an ambush, but since it's not for the full army, it ends up splitting your forces quite a bit, which isn't ideal. Lastly, Poison for Ungors is great for an early advantage. Poison rocks and is always useful. It's just a shame it's on units you want to replace as soon as you possibly can. His skills upgrade his ambushing ability further, which is great alongside buffs, focusing on the smaller units in the roster. Everything here is good, but nothing is really outstanding, ambush chance aside. Khazrak himself is an okay battler, and once he's on a chariot he can be a real terror, with the one caveat being he's on a chariot, so you have to use him well to get value, or he'll probably die in seconds. The ambush stuff is really the main reason Khazrak is beating Morgur. The ability to make a battle so heavily in your favour is so strong, so making that more likely to succeed is incredibly powerful. Whilst his starting location may be a little challenging, the ambush more than levels the playing field. In battle, he is harder to use than most, as chariots are one of the hardest units to use well in the entire game. His army effects are okay, but nothing to write home about, so it really is all about the campaign with this one. Coming in 2nd place, we have Malagor the Dark Omen. His faction effects are mainly focused on heroes and primarily the casters, which makes sense as the Beastmen Master of Magic. Extra campaign movement range will never be a bad thing, and the caster lords and heroes are okay, so no real complaints, but nothing too exciting either. The starting location is decent. The starting battle against vampire counts shouldn't be too much trouble, especially with the replenishment blocking power. After that, it's mainly greenskins with a little bit of corn, skaven, and some other herbs and spices in the Badlands Brawl. It's nice and central, so you can really really choose where to go, which is pretty cool. His battle effects at face value are pretty great, but not outstanding. The Beast Path's extra range is very useful, and replenishment blocking will never be a bad thing. 8 leadership being drained is cool, but Fear for Harpies, which are a pretty weak unit you probably won't want to use a lot of, is a little bit useless once the game gets going. However, Malagor himself brings a lot more value than just that once you get into his skill tree. His unique line has the ability to decrease enemy leadership by another 9, and then another 8 when close to him. That means if he's standing there menacingly near a unit, they're already losing 25 leadership before he even does anything. It also increases his magic power, upgrades those damn harpies, and gives him constant damage auras so he can rack up value even without fighting. Yes, his battle stats are pretty weak, but he has a pretty great set of spells, so it doesn't really bother me that he can't fight, especially once you consider everything else he brings. Long ago, I ranked Malagor last, and now I've come back and I've seen the error of my ways. Looking from faction select, he really doesn't seem all that great, and initially he was towards the bottom of the list, but it's really his skills and how they interact with his faction effects that swayed me. The ability to take 25 leadership from enemies just by standing next to them is insane, and considering his starting location, outright broken. Vampire counts and greenskins aren't known for massive leadership, so he'll be able to break some units without even landing a single hit. Aside from this, his starting location is nice and central and works really well for his particular faction. Beastmen versus greenskins normally would not be the best matchup, but with the leadership penalties, it makes things a lot more in your favor. It feels like I'm putting a lot of weight on Malagor himself, and whilst that's true, for the Beastmen, it's okay since the Lord's army are all you have for quite a while. By the time you build more, Malagor will have set you up very nicely for the rest of your campaign. And in first place, could it be anyone other than Taurox? First of all, he's the only Beastman lore that has unique mechanics in the form of his rampages. This allows him to rack up momentum by winning battles, and the longer this goes on, the more powerful effects he can apply to his faction. This mechanic also allows him to reset his movement range, letting him cover a truly wacky amount of distance in a single turn. Aside from this, he brings cost reductions for increasing his capacity for Minotaurs, which are some of the best units in the roster, so an absolutely fantastic effect to have. His starting location is up in the northwestern mountains, so we're looking at a lot of Dark Elves with the occasional Rats and Pirates. It's north or south with Dark Elves in either direction, so whilst the variety is fairly limited, you're not railroaded too harshly. Dark Elves are another okay matchup for Beastmen, so as opponents go, it could be a lot worse. His army can use an alternate raiding stance, which allows them more movement range but less income, and I think this is a great trade-off since Beastmen have no expenses and Taurox needs constant battle to function. Plus, raiding gives him immunity to attrition, so it's a great way to get through hostile lands safely and quickly. Alongside this, his army leaves the Rivers of Blood effect wherever they go after winning battles, and this reduces non-chaos leadership whilst increasing it for chaos. And yeah, that's another pretty great effect to have. Lastly, he increases the weapon strength of Minotaurs, and as I said, they're some of the best units in the roster, so rock on. His skills mainly empower himself in battle, alongside some buffs for Minotaurs. His battle power is truly spectacular. He may not have any spells or a ton of powerful abilities, but he can hit really hard, so it doesn't matter too much. He's practically a one-man army, so giving him an army alongside makes him hard to stop. I mean, this one was incredibly obvious. Not only is Taurox the best Beastman lord, he's one of the most powerful lords in the game. Everything that makes the Beastmen great, plus his rampages to make them even better. The best battler, by far, even without spells or auras, and he focuses on Minotaurs, the best unit the faction has. It's like he was scientifically designed to be broken, and by God, they succeeded. And that's my ranking for every Beastman Legendary Lord in Total War Warhammer 3. Do you disagree with my ranking? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more ranking videos, then check out this one all about the best unit for every single faction in the game.